Let's call the meeting to order, please. For the record, the media has been notified in accordance with the requirements of the Freedom of Information Act. Ms. Davis, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bryson?
Here.
Mr. Coleman?
Here.
Mr. Dove?
Here.
Dr. Dozier?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Mr. Elmore?
Here.
Mr. Freeman?
Here, we got Mr. Brown.
Mr. Gunn?
Here.
Ms. Hartung? Here. Mr. Jackson?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Keels?
Here.
Senator, Ms. Leatherman? Mr. Lee?
Here.
Mr. McIntyre?
Here.
Mr. Moore?
Here.
Dr. Ray Kelly?
Here.
So there'll be a quorum present. Move to item 2. You have in your advanced materials the February 28th, 2019 minutes. Are there any exceptions or additions?
Move that be approved as submitted.
Motion by Mr. Coleman.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Move on to now the committee reports. The Executive Affairs. The Executive Affairs Committee is reporting out Resolution 219 it is for the acceptance of the gift of property from the Francis Marion University Education Foundation. I believe Dr. Carter will speak to this later on. You have the resolution in your packets. It comes from the Executive Committee unanimously. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So, Ms. Hartung, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. McIntyre. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Resolution 219 is adopted. Now move to Academic Affairs and Accreditation. Ms. Bryson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Academic Affairs and Accreditation Committee met today. We were provided a number of reports from the College of Liberal Arts, the School of Business, the School of Education, and the School of Health Sciences. We also received a special report from the Department of Physics and Engineering and Library. We also received information from Enrollment Management. It's orientation season. There are 10 orientation sessions scheduled for this spring and summer. 3 have already been held, including Scholarship Awards Day, a freshman orientation, and a transfer orientation. Freshman overnight orientation is coming up the 24th and 25th of this month, just around the corner. And those are going exceedingly well. Our dual enrollment programs continue to grow, and that's a great outreach for the university. The registrar reported that at May commencement, we had 308 graduates. 290 of those were undergrad and 18 graduate. And finally, 5 new programs were launched at the university this past school year, and 2 more new ones are planned for spring of 2020, psychiatric nurse practitioner, and then mechanical engineering, which was approved by CHE in March of this year. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Question, Mr. Bryson. Hearing no question, Mr. Bryson. Mr. Moore, Development and Alumni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a great meeting with Development and Alumni Committee. I want to just highlight a few points. Several new scholarships have been established since the last meeting, with many of them including need-based criteria. The Education Foundation received an unmodified opinion on the annual audit and continues to provide resources to meet the needs of the students. The Performing Arts Center has several shows booked for the upcoming season, including The Temptations, Steve Earle and the Dukes, The Gin Blossoms, Jimmy Webb, the Texas Tenors, and Sean Colvin, with more being scheduled. And Alumni Affairs is launching a membership campaign this fall that will provide multiple membership options and continue to increase alumni engagement with the university and one another. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Question, Mr. Moore. Hearing no question, Mr. Moore. Financial Affairs and Facilities, Mr. Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had several rather important items on the report today, and I'm going to defer to Mr. Kispert to provide some overview there, if you would, Jay.
The review of the budget summary report, spring revenues totaled 16.67, 97.6% of our revenue estimate, and total general funds revenues are $58.8 million, which is about 99% of the revenue we estimated. Expenses, as of this report date, which was May the 31st, our expenses, our general funds were at 87% expended, and our financial aid is currently projected, as it has been for some years, at about 87%, or about $53.7 million in financial aid. We have also asked the board for their consideration of Resolution 0319, which has to do with the issuance of a bond issue and refinancing of bonds that we currently have on our athletic complex. We have been in consultation with a financial advisor, and he's advised of the feasibility to refinance our 2008 bond issue used to construct the athletic complex. That's going to take care of two enhancements we have. One is the renovation of the university center, locker rooms, training rooms, and the like. And the other will be to add on to our field house at the Griffin Athletic Complex. The coupons currently are estimated at 3.0 to 3.15%, and that's significantly less than 4.98 of our 2008 issuance. This refinance was referred to as a tentative 2019A series, would not extend the payoff date of the original issuance, which is 2029, and the 2019B series of the $3.2 million that we're asking is a wraparound series, has a 15-year life at the date of the payoff in 2034. We hope to have this refinance in the mill by December of this year, and we ask the board's consideration to approve Resolution 0319.
Thank you, Mr. Kispert. And at this time, Resolution 319, which is approval to seek refinancing of 2009A athletic revenue bond and funding for new athletic facility improvements.
Resolution 319 for approval to seek refinancing for 2008 athletic facilities revenue bonds and new funding for the athletic facility improvements has been brought forward unanimously by the Finance Committee. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Next item on your for your consideration is that the resolution of the university budget approval. And each of you has a copy of this. It's been distributed or in your package.
Resolution 0419 for university budget approval comes unanimously from the Finance Committee. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a motion? Have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Coleman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously.
That's the sum of the actions.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn. Any question, Mr. Gunn? Hearing no question, Mr. Gunn. Student Affairs and Athletics, Mr. Dove.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Student Affairs and Athletics Committee did meet. Ms. Ramey gave us a report on awards this year for outstanding students. She also complimented the faculty and staff advisors who volunteer to lead our student organizations. She introduced Ms. Kendria Mason, who is our new SGA incoming president. Ms. Mason, raise your hand so we can see who you are. Thank you. Then we heard from athletics and Mr. Harslow. The good news is our athletics averaged this year a 2.95 GPA, which is slightly higher than the regular student body, which is always good news to hear. 22 students this year had a perfect 4.0 GPA. 119 student athletes had a 3.0 or above, and 12 were inducted into Chi Alpha Sigma this year. 7 of the teams had loss records improved this year over last year, and men's basketball was 21-9 consecutive 20-win season and went to NCAA playoffs for the straight second year. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Dove. Question, Mr. Dove? No hearing no questions, we now move to the next item, President's Report. Dr. Carter.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you know, one of the most famous of all of the Sherlock Holmes stories is the Adventure of Silver Blaze. And I'll refresh your memory on this. Some of you may not remember, but Holmes tracks the murderer through the dog that didn't bark. Well, in beginning my report today, I want to call your attention to our traditional June agenda. And what is the dog that didn't bark on this agenda? Tuition. There's no tuition increase on this agenda. And I want to compliment the men and women of this university, the faculty and staff, for their diligent effort this year to make that possible. I want to compliment the trustees for their support this year to bring us where we are. And I want to give a big thank you to the legislative leadership in both the House and Senate who gave us enough money this year that we're able to forego a tuition increase. This may be an agenda item to us, but for many of our parents and students, not raising the tuition even 1% or 1.5% makes an enormous amount of difference as they try to prepare their budgets this summer for their sons and daughters to come back to school in the fall. So my compliments to all of you for making this possible. Give yourself a pat on the back. And let's give the legislature a pat on the back. I know many of you will go home and read the Adventure of Silver Blaze, but let me talk very, very briefly about some of our construction projects that Mr. Kispert alluded to and some of the items that you've passed today on the agenda. The old post office, the construction efforts underway, the plans are being drafted. We anticipate that construction will begin on that facility about November or December of this year. That'll be about an 18-month to 2-year process. The contractor thinks it can be done more quickly than that. I don't know. It's a complex building. It's a beautiful building inside, and it'll be a delight to watch the interior of that building become transformed over the next year and a half. And I would remind you that we will put in that building expansion of our medical programs, health science programs, our occupational therapy program in 3 years will go in there when we develop it. Speech therapy will continue to grow in there, as will the nurse practitioner program, and the 3rd and 4th year medical students will continue to grow and use facilities in that building. That'll also complete that nice square area for us downtown, and will lead to yet another wonderful phase in the development of downtown revitalization. A number of people in Florence have long wondered how we would find a way to revitalize the old post office. Well, I think that's going to happen over the next couple of years, and as long as that post office remains in university hands, it'll always be well provided for. I would also tell you, given the caveats in the transfer of that property and purchase of that property from Bruce and Lee, it will always remain in the university hands. So, let me talk a little bit briefly about the Honor Center. We've chosen our contractor and our architects on the Honor Center. That building is also plans being drafted on that building. We've decided, we've agreed upon a final floor plan for that building. The Honor Center will be located between the Cawthon Media Center and Stokes Administration Building right on the quad. The center will be home to the honors program, the international program, and the McNair Center. Altogether, it'll accommodate about 400, 500 students in and out of that building. It'll be a terrific addition to finish out that what amounts to the west side of the quad as you come out of the back of Stokes building. You're going to like the design of that building. It has a translucent roof on it in the center part of it, so the sun will will penetrate into the area underneath, which will accommodate a water feature. So it'll be a nice building, and I think the students in each of those programs will enjoy the use of that building very, very much. Some of you on the way in this morning probably passed our apartment area. You noticed that the old apartments, those village apartments, the first residences ever built on this campus, are now in the process of renovation. FBI Builders are the contractor. They've done a wonderful job renovating that, and we anticipate that the students, all those buildings will be operational in August as we move students in them. And that renovation's long overdue, but it's very, very sightly, and it'll be a wonderful addition to the residences that exist on this campus. You approved today a resolution that transferred from the University Foundation to the university proper, the land on which our ecology center and conference center will be built out just north of I-95 off Williston Road. We received $5 million in the budget this year for the construction of those two facilities on that property, and if you recall, Bruce and Lee transferred that 145 acres to us earlier in the year. So that ecology center, that conference center, will also be a wonderful addition to the university. And that will, particularly the ecology center, will open the door to our biology and natural science faculty doing more and more research into fisheries and in the area of water quality. We're very excited about that. You passed today a bond resolution that provided 3.2 additional funding on a refinancing of our athletic facilities loan that will allow us to complete the field house in the Griffin Athletic Center across the road on the west campus. And in addition to that, that will allow us to get into the back of the Smith Student Center, take out some of those old locker facilities, renovate those locker facilities, put a hydrotherapy area back there and treatment areas for our athletes. And it will also allow us to remove some of those old handball courts and put some more athletic offices back there as we renovate the back part of the Smith Center. So I thank you for the passage of that resolution. That's going to make a big difference with regard to supporting our, in particular, volleyball and men and women's basketball. Let me talk for just a second, Mr. Chairman, about the First Generation Fund. If you recall, we kicked that off shortly after the first of the year. To date, we've raised a little over $250,000 in that First Generation Fund. Remember, that's a fund that's set aside specifically for men and women who attend this university, who are first-generation college students who need financial support to be able to cross our threshold. So those dollars are designated specifically for those young men and women, and we're delighted at the support of the board in making this come about. We're delighted with your contributions, but let me also tell you how many faculty and staff have contributed to that fund as well, because they believe in the education of those men and women at this institution. In fact, many of our faculty and staff, as many of you know, were first-generation college students themselves, something that I think many of us believe in at Francis Marion. Your board retreat is scheduled for the 1st of August. That board retreat will begin at 9 o'clock at the executive committee in the morning, 1st of August, 9 o'clock. The executive committee will meet. The board will convene at 10. We'll work on retreat related items from 10 until 2, and then the committees will convene, Mr. Chairman, beginning at 2, and that day will end about 4:30, I believe, given the schedule in front of us. I know this is very, very exciting. It's going to be hard for many of you to contain yourself on this one, but we're going to talk about our 3-year operational plans at the board retreat. We've spent some time earlier this year talking about strategic plans and preparation for the SACS accreditation review. Now we want to move from the strategic processes to talking about exactly what we're going to be doing over the next 3 years operationally. from the standpoint of curriculum, from the standpoint of facilities, from the standpoint of community outreach and community opportunities that we'll pursue. So that'll be Mr. Chairman, that'll be the program for the board retreat, and each of the vice presidents will be sharing in the presentation at that board retreat, and I know they'll all do their best to make that inspiring for the board. So in about a week and a half, we will celebrate our 49th birthday as a university. So this coming year, we planned a series of events to celebrate the lead into the half-century anniversary of Francis Marion University. We appointed a committee, an advisory committee that have worked through some recommendations. I'll bring those recommendations to the board in August with dates relative to when critical events are being planned. But there's about half a dozen events that will occur over the next year that will recognize not just the creation of the university 50 years ago, but will recognize many of the men and women who played a role in the creation of the university. We're looking forward to that. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I have one last item. Today marks the last board meeting that Colonel Kispert will join us in his role as the Vice President for Business Affairs. You know, all of us have Colonel Kispert stories, okay? Most of them are good. But let me say this. I first met Jay about 25 years ago. No, that's not right. I've been there about 35 years ago. I met him at Paris Island. I was a brand new junior colonel, and I'd been assigned to Paris Island to be the commanding officer of the reserve unit. And I was thrown in with all these other shark colonels who were older and wiser, and they were regulars and I was a reserve. But you see, our chief of staff was the wisest colonel of all. His name was Jay Kispert. And he reached out and he took care of his young reserve colonel, and he made me smarter, and he made me into a much stronger Marine Corps officer as a result of that experience. So years later, when the Department of Juvenile Justice was looking for a chief of staff to straighten out many of the messes that department had, I was fortunate enough to be able to arrange an interview with Colonel Kispert with Governor Beasley, who was enormously impressed by Colonel Kispert, hired him on the spot. And that began what has amounted in Jay's life to about 27 years, I think, with the state of South Carolina. First as the chief of staff of the Department of Juvenile Justice, and the last 17 years as the Vice President for Business Affairs with us. I can't tell you what a pleasure it's been for me to work with Jay. I think I can say on the part of all of our faculty and staff that it's been an absolute joy and delight to work with him. And ladies and gentlemen, would you join me in giving a rousing ovation to Jay? Mr. Chairman, I couldn't find a more appropriate way to conclude my remarks. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for Dr. Carter? Hearing no questions for Dr. Carter, there is no unfinished business. There is no new business. We do not have need for an executive session. We have a motion to adjourn. Stand adjourned.